which is, why does the light want to shine, right? Light, which is essentially an ilav alul capacity. What is ilav alul? He said, cause and effect. What are some properties of cause and effect? They're erich to each other, which, right? They're compared to each other. They're not completely in different worlds, which means what? What does that lead the cause, the effect to want to do? What's that?
To shine to one another, to go back to one another.
Shine to one another. What does it lead the effect to want to do? Return to the cause. It wants to be inside of its cause, right? It doesn't really want to leave, because when it comes out, it's vibrating at a lower level, and the light leaves the source. It's a lower level of light. Light's interest is to be in a state of devekis and clinging to its source. Therefore, if light had its own way, it would never come out, right? Because it's shining brighter and higher when it's inside of its source. So we said that it's what makes it go against its nature to come out. The same can be said about the soul, which is also called like a burning fire, right? What makes it come out? We said something has to force it to come out. And we started this conversation because we were speaking about how the letters, when you speak, generate a deeper state of intelligence miraculously than when you were just thinking. And why is that? Because they go up to their root in the koach hamaskil, and they basically force the koach hamaskil, their own source, to deliver a deeper, more panemius hashpa, right? And so we said this is the same thing as what's forcing them, the speech, which is seemingly this lowly thing, but because it has such a very high source in the koach hamaskil, it's able to force the light to come out. And ultimately, the same is true with light and the neshama. What is causing the light to want to come out, right? In the case of the neshama, we said it's the goof, right? The body itself is able to force the soul to come out. How is the body able to do that? So we didn't really put the pieces together yet yesterday. We said because the source of the body is higher than the source of the soul, then when the light is running to connect to the body, it's ultimately being forced because it is kind of going according to its nature, right? It's trying to attach itself to something which is higher than it. The body, source of the body is actually higher than the source of the light. Where does the light find a way to attach itself to that high source? By going down to the body. So going down is actually a way for it to go up, because the source of the body is higher than the source of the light. By attaching itself to the body, it is actually essentially trying to cling to the essence, right? So, and therefore, the body itself forces the soul to come down. Does everyone understand that? We spoke about it a little bit yesterday. Jake, on the ball? All right, let's take it from the top line of page Tes here. Actually, let's take it from the bottom line of page Ches, the very bottom line, where it says, Kamaimer bal karchach atachai. It says, against your will you live. The fact that the soul lives inside the body, who bal karchach, it's against the soul's will. It's uncomfortable being down here. It wants to be in its root. It's an ilav alul situation. It's like light. It would rather be in a higher source. But here it is against its will. Not in accordance with its own nature and will. Its essential will. Who's the one who's forcing it to come out and be down here? Zeo aguf. We said the body. Because the source of the body is higher than the source of the soul. And that's where we got up to yesterday. This is new. As it's known, that the soul, it's rooted in a state of what's called mamali kolomim. In other words, what is mamali kolomim? It's the limited light which fills the worlds. Just in a word, mamali kolomim means light that fills the worlds. And the idea there, since it fills the worlds, of course, is that it can go inside of something. And since it goes inside of something, filling, therefore it's limited and it has boundaries and edges. And therefore, it's a type of godly light which has limitations, right? There's obviously godly light which is infinite and has no limitations, and there's a type of godly light which can mold and breathe life into a thing, which means that it is some way bound by that thing and constricted, and intrinsically it can It can have limitations. So what we're saying here is that the soul itself, in its source, comes from that kind of constricted light. Even though we like to think of the soul as higher than that, the reality is the source of the soul, it comes from mamali kolomi. Strange, Strangely, the body, its source is from the Orein Sof, which is Sovi Kolomim. The source of the body comes from this light which has no boundaries, has no restrictions. What is that? How does that make sense to us, by the way? Seemingly, the body is much more constricted than the soul. The soul is like sort of this ethereal thing. The body's very much bound up in a finite form. So why are we saying that the source of the body, obviously we're not talking about the body itself, let's say, but the source of the body, what about the body is Sovev-like? And what about the soul is so Mamale-like? Can anyone say something about that?
Perhaps I could say once you get to the gospel spoke a little before, that needs a second spark of light, second, same with speech actually, that it goes and has to pull back from the highest thing when you get into the actual gospel. When you get to this level, that's what it
is Sovev-like. That's what we're saying. The source of the body is from. Where do you see Sovev energy in the body? And for that matter, the soul. Why is it so connected with Mamale light? What's so Mamale about the soul?
The soul is like a filling for the body.
The soul fills the body. Okay, that makes sense.
It's kind of an encompassing effect on the soul.
Okay, so you have a concept of surrounding and inside. That's not bad. The soul. Another aspect of Mamale is, of course, is that it's broken up into parts. Because when something fills, that means it has edges. That means it can be described and named. And once it has an edge, you can also divide that thing into 2, into 3, into 10. In other words, one of the properties of Mamali Kolomim is that it has parts. One of the properties of Soviet Kolomim is that it doesn't have parts, right? Because since it's infinite, it doesn't fit into anything, you can't divide it, it's indivisible. So the soul, it makes somewhat sense that it has parts because the soul is basically these 10 spheros, and it's describable. The soul is sometimes like the name of Hashem. It has chokhmah, it has bina, it has ways of describing itself. Its inyan is giloy. Its inyan is to reveal. And if you're going to reveal something, you can't really stay in a state of non-description and reveal yourself so simply. So the soul, therefore, breaks itself down into descriptions, spheros, letters, etc., so that it can be revealing something to you. And therefore, it's like mamale, it's divisible. The body, when we mean the body here, what we really mean is not so much the different body parts. We're talking about the goof, the materialism, the material of the goof itself. The material of the goof itself is essentially, it's the same skin on your head as it is on your foot. We're talking about when you go into the material state, even though in this material state, you can go and make out different levels, like you can find a man or an animal or a plant or a rock, and they're definitely different degrees of materialism, but one thing that they share equally and in common is that they're material. In other words, when you're going to sort of not pay attention to the pure raw materialism of the man, you're going to highlight the fact that he's an intelligent being. You've already sort of moved yourself away from his raw essence of just being a material body. The chiddush of a man in this world is not that he can think, because the soul is what's making him think, and the soul can think much greater when it's in the spiritual world. There's like a little imprint of the soul in the materialism, and what you're seeing there is the mamale kol olmin aspect of the man. But the soviv kol olmin aspect of the man, that part of him which comes from the indivisible sovev light, it's exactly the same in him as it is in a rock. It's just materialism. And that's what we mean when we say that the body comes from a place which is nondescript and it has no parts, because it's basically just like pure matter is essentially what we're talking about. That aspect of yourself, which is just the pure matter of yourself, which makes you equal to everything, all the other matter, without looking at the distinction between whether you can speak or moo or grow like a plant. Just that's all like the spirituality that's messing with the matter. But the pure, simple matter of the goof, it doesn't have any distinctions, right? It's all just one simple thing. And therefore, it is sort of a reflection on a level of light, which also has no distinctions. And it's therefore the Sovev light, which is higher than the distinctive, limited, divisible aspects of the light, which is in the soul. And therefore, your soul's source is from Mamale, and your body's source is from Sovev. Any of that makes sense to anybody? Not to Yossi? How about you guys down there? Following along? Yeah. Yossi, you want to ask a question or just hold there?
I'll be honest, the entire time we've been running this, I didn't know anything. So, and I've been just keeping it to myself.
You've been what?
I don't want to disturb the class, so I really don't understand any of it. So
that's a much bigger question than the scope of this. All right, we'll have to.
pretending to understand, so I could.
All right, well then we got to talk more frequently. You're talking about the terminology, or just like explaining all these concepts? Next thing that comes up that you don't understand. It ain't baishan lam. It's a person who's shy and embarrassed can't learn. So you got to break out. You've done well right now. Yeah.
Why did we say Orient Sof is being much higher than Soviet?
No, the Orient Sof and the Soviet are usually say Orient Sof has Soviet Kolami. It goes together. Because again, what is the Orient Sof? Ein Sof means no end. It's pretty much a description of what we just said. Sovev light is a light which has no end, therefore it can't fit into anything, right? Also, Sovev means circular, right? Or surrounding. That's what we call it. Surrounding means it doesn't. You can't put it inside of something, right? Which is like Ein Sof. It's infinite. So they're actually synonymous.
So what is the purpose?
What's that?
So what is its purpose if it can't be put into anything?
Well, it's the underlying life force of everything. In other words, if I'm going to take like a description, the mamale kolamim light, right? If it doesn't have the raw existence of, in other words, let's say for example, I have like an infinite ocean of water, then I can take out a bucket of water and I can capture it and taste it, describe it, etc. But it is made out of sovev, right? Its very energy is sovev. So the mamale light wouldn't even be there unless the Soviet light was there. The fact that it's like, think about this, we sometimes talk about energy and matter. Everything that you see here is essentially slowed down or congealed energy turned into matter, right? So you say, I only see matter here, I don't see energy. What does energy have to do with anything? If it's all energy. If there was no energy, there'd be no matter, right? So even though you can't actually point and say, there's the energy, because it's already congealed itself, and what you're seeing it's a description of this energy in some finite form, but the reality is underlying that matter, if you break it down to its essential form, it's all just sovev light. It's just that you can't see the sovev. It doesn't show up. How it shows up is when it congeals and becomes mamale, right? But underlying it is nothing other than sovev. All right, so the body comes from sovev, the soul comes from mamale. That's what we're holding right now. Sha'al zeh ne'amar, 3 lines down. Upon this it says, Kol asher chafetz Hashem asa. All that Hashem desired, He made, right? In that little line, right, the Kabbalists somehow deduced everything we just said. Does anyone see it inside the words? Everything we just said, the body comes from the sovev. They somehow found that in these 4 words. Kol asher, or 5 words. Kol asher chafetz Hashem asa. Where do they see that? Desire. How does that tell me that the sovev light is the source of the body? Yeah, you got to be one of the sages. So chafetz, first of all, means what? Desire, which is really another way of saying sovev, actually. Why? Because we know that the spheros, the will, is in what sphera? Keser, right? You have above chokhmah, wisdom, you have the will, which is keser. Chafetz is even the penimius of Keser. It's sometimes described as they have the will, and like the innermost will is called the chafetz, and therefore, what does it say in this pasuk? Kol asher chafetz Hashem asa is lashon asiya, right? So you see right next to these 2 words, seemingly, what do they have to do with each other? On the contrary, they're the furthest you could be from each other. Asiya is the lowest possible thing, i.e. the body, the physical matter. Chafetz is the deepest essential aspect of the will, i.e. the sovev light. So you see, the chafetz Hashem makes the asiya. The asiya whom bechinas chafetz ratzon avaya dafka, specifically in the asiya, in the lowest form, in the goof, do you have its source, the presence of the deepest, innermost will of Hashem, the Sovev light. Like it says over there in another Maimer, Shmini Atzeres, on page Tuf Kuf Ayin Beis, Ubiuro, and its explanation of that Maimer, and in Divra Maschil Toldos, he also brings over there that a different reference, right? V'lechein mitzad shorsho hakadum harihu machriach es a nefesh hefech tivo. And this is what we've been saying. Therefore, because of the body's primordial source, roots, therefore it's what's able to force the soul to come out of itself, the opposite of its nature. The soul would just be much happier, staying inside of the source and being energized in the highest possible manner. What makes it go against its nature and come out, I ultimately go lower, seemingly going further away than the source, the opposite of cause and effect, that the effect wants to be always in the cause. The goof, right, which the goof is from the Sovev light, which is far higher than even the source of the Mamale. And therefore, ultimately, when the soul sees the body, he sees the Chafetz Hashem. Even though it's Asiya that he's seeing, he sees that inside of that Asiya is the Keser Elyon, and therefore he's going up when he's going down, because he's trying to attach himself to that source. You following that? And he's ready to do it and take on the project, going down, being drawn down and enlivening the body. Therefore we see that, God forbid, when there would be some type of disturbance or blemish in a particular limb, the limb's not working properly, God forbid. So then what happens is the light of the soul leaves it, right? In other words, it's not going to hang around in a limb which is not functional. When you fix the difficulty in that limb, right? We both just sort of shared this experience, right? All of a sudden I woke up one morning, I had like no use of the tip of my finger. And it was just freaky. I couldn't operate it. But give it a few weeks, you like fix the body, and all of a sudden the soul decides to show up to the party again. And like you regain a certain power of your soul that was not available because the body wasn't giving it, he wasn't interested in going to that part of the body. The body wasn't participating. As soon as the body gets back into shape, the soul's like, okay, you forced me back. I'll come back. Yeah. So when you fix the difficulty in the limb, nimshach or hanefesh mimela, automatically, right? You don't have to like sort of prepare your soul. It is kind of miraculous. You're wondering if I'm ever going to be able to use my hand again. All of a sudden, boom, right? The soul's power just decides to automatically rejoin your now fixed limb. But he's saying is you don't need to do anything special to bring the souls back into that part into that limb. It automatically comes down. What makes it automatically come down? It's as though the now fixed limb has like command and control. Hey, light of the soul, which makes these fingers move the way in a spiritual way. You're here now. We were demanding your presence back into these fingers. Right? How does this little finger, this little piece of flesh, have such a domination on these soul powers? Right? The guy can be a fancy artist, musician. He knows how to use those fingers with rationale and training, and all of a sudden, all of that soul power goes away. All of a sudden, you just put a little cast on your finger, and this soul breathes life into that finger without you having to do anything. You just put the goof back in place. It forces the soul to reemerge automatically. Yeah, it has a chutzpah. The soul is mamish, does whatever the body tells it to do. I'm here. I'm healthy. You got to come in.
Wouldn't the soul be in pain also by not filling up everything, like all the soul capabilities? Something's missing. Wouldn't it want to fill up?
On the contrary, your soul's capabilities don't go away. It's just that they're not able to be utilized in the physical body. But for example, when your soul goes back to its source, it has even more, wondrous abilities and functionality than it did when it was trapped in your body and it had to sort of mechanically move this animal around. Your soul is an awesome thing, right? You can play all Beethoven, Mozart, anything it wants. I'm serious. It's like an unlimited entity of extraordinary intellect, emotion, right? When it comes to the body, all those things get lowered and clouded and clumsy. That's not where the action happens. The reality is Hashem wants to dir b'tachtoni. And there's something that the soul gets to have an aliyah, as we said before, by attaching to godliness in this plane, because this plane ultimately has a source in Keser Elyon. But the functionality of the soul and so forth is actually even greater when it's back in its source. Yeah.
I've heard before a distinction between the Ratzon of the well and Tainuk, but what exactly is Chafetz?
It's like Tainuk. It's
kind of an ending of running or pursuing.
Yeah, it's basically it's a strong desire. It's a panemius of the ratzon. Again, you can have a will, which is an external will, whereas you're doing something willfully, but it's not really what you want. It's not like your ultimate goal. You're sort of you're willfully doing one operation because it brings you to your chafetz, your real desire. So the panemius of the desire, like what the essentially what you want, which is also like the highest source of yourself, that's called your chafetz, right? So that actually shows it shows up in gashmias, because ultimately Hashem's ultimate desire is in gashmias, not ruchnias, and therefore in the flesh, kol asher chafetz Hashem asa, his chafetz is somehow planted in the Asiya. The powers of the soul realize that, and that's why they're automatically drawn there, because they're running after the essence of Hashem, which they can't access somehow. When they're up there, Hashem gives them an avenue to access it when it attaches itself down in the goof. And that is why we're saying that automatically your soul powers will come now into this fixed body. Hainu lefisha evre haguf, evari haguf, machrichim, mamshichim, or hanefesh. Because just like we said before about letters, that they go up and forcefully draw down more intellect from the koach hamaskil, the limbs of your body forcefully draw down the light of your soul. As long as you have a healthy body, you can't keep your soul out. It's gonna rush to that place. He says, wait a second, I have an example for you. Where's Noam? I would have thought he would have brought, he's always ready with the example. To the contrary. So he said, what about the fainting? If a person faints, right? He's alfus. Mitalef. What if the person faints, God forbid? Then we do see that there's certain special tricks you can do to pull the body back into the soul. So pull the soul back into the body. Excuse me.
Restart.
Huh?
It's a restart.
But the point is that what do you do, right? We he says, "Kamo reach chazak." Sometimes you put a smelling salts, shemei shivas hanefesh, that brings the soul back in. But then why is this a contrary to what we just said? Because we said that if the body's healthy, the soul would run into it. You don't need to do anything special to get the soul to come down. The soul is forced to come down against its nature of being inside of its root, because it's chasing after the source of the goof, which is found in the goof. So why then sometimes the body can be healthy and you have to force the soul to come back into it? He says, because reality is, no, this is just another example of the same thing. Your body's not healthy. If your body was healthy at that moment, your soul would flow into it, right? But there's a reason you fainted. There's something happened to your body. When the body gets extraordinarily faint, right? When something happens to a person faints, like their blood sugar goes crazy or something happens, their body suddenly has a quick attack, and it's not being its regular body self, which would automatically force the soul to come down. Therefore, tzrichim tachbulos, you need to come up with all kinds of machinations, lashiv es nefesh al yedei reach chazak, because the goof is not healthy, you do have to come up with all kinds of plans and derive, ways to return the soul to the body, for example, with strong smelling salts. Aval kasher aguf bari v'hu ketikuno. However, when the body is healthy and everything is working normally in the body, gam bli pu'ula hanal, then even without any type of efforts, like smelling salts, yashuv nafsho ilav, your soul will automatically come down. In other words, as long as your gut body is healthy, the soul cannot help but to be forced to flow into it. So you break a bone, all of a sudden you lose power of your hands, you fix the bone, boom, you don't have to do anything. It just wants to come back. It's racing to come back. It's waiting for you to give it a healthy body so it could just reside again there, totally against the nature of the soul. This is like one of the most wondrous things in the world, by the way. Every time you go to the bathroom, you finish your bracha, hamaflila sos, right? You say, what does it mean? Hashabruch ata Hashem hamaflila sos. What do those words mean? Hamaflila sos. He mamash makes wonders. And what do the Mefarshim say the wonders are? What that he makes? What is this wonder? Remember, you just used all your faculties and you're saying chalim, nekavim. You're like looking at your body. The wonder is that your spiritual soul is attached to your physical body. There's no greater wonder yet that they figured out how that makes any sense. That you could just take a rock and you like mamash inject it with spirit, and now it goes talking and skiing. Right? It's just a crazy operation that you're at every moment that your soul is attached to your body. It's the biggest miracle. And the fact is, we're seeing why it's such a big miracle, because it's not normal that spirituality wants to reside somewhere lower, right? It wants to go always higher and higher and higher. Now we're understanding that mystery, why it happens, because it is actually going higher by going lower. Because it's seeking a way to attach itself to that source of the Soviv Kolomim, which is found in the body, in a Siya.
What's the reason that we have to have smelling salts?
So in that case, it's because it's like if you broke a bone. In other words, it doesn't look like it. Your body looks like it's all fine, but the reality is something terrible happened to your body. It got weakened, and it's not a healthy kli that can hold the soul, right? Yeah.
In spite of its lofty status of the body, when the soul is not attached to it, it's chinas domem. It's nothing. It's domem.
Even when the soul is attached to it, it's chinas domem. Your bones, fingernails, your hair. It's. I mean, there's an aspect of even. First of all, I just want to point out that everything in this world has an aspect of domem.
Yes.
Right. That's what makes it be part of this world. Right. In other words, you're a plant. Fine. You're happy growing. What's growing? Right. Just like we were talking before a second ago about the difference between, you said, what's the point of Sovev, right? And I was trying to say, what do you mean? It's like the energy, anything you see, which is matter, is only just an aspect of that very energy, like forming into a particular matter. Same thing is true with everything in this world. You say, oh, what do you mean? It's not domem, it's a man. The man is nothing other than domem walking and talking. What do you mean? It's not domem, it's someach, it's growing. What's growing, right? There's a material there which is growing. So it's all domem at the end of the day, right? Anything in this physical world is domem. It's either domem sitting there like a rock doing nothing, being quiet, domem, or it's domem growing, or it's domem walking around and mooing, or it's domem sitting and learning Chassidus, right? It's all the Sovev light. It just is you're caught by the form and you forget that everything's domem here. You're just a rock.
Isn't it medaber?
I'm saying, what is medaber? Medaber is a rock talking, right? Because if you live, for example, in a world of Yetzirah, then you don't have the domem there. Spirituality is the material which is talking. They have a form of medaber in the higher worlds as well, right? No, medaber is the speaker, right? But what they don't have is the rock. Every other world is not the domem world. We are the bottom of creation, which is we are the rock. Yeah. If you go up one, Yetzirah, Bri, they have all the other qualities. They don't have domem. And that's the whole point why the Torah was given into this world. Why the soul, if the soul's rushing to come down into the Sovev, why doesn't it stop in Yetzirah and just be like, oh, I came down far enough? The soul would never leave Atzilus if it was going to Yetzirah. Because there's nothing in Yetzirah which is going to capture its imagination and say, I want Sovev. Where can I get some Sovev? So it's only leaving Atzilus because it wants to get into your physical domem body. Otherwise, it has no business with any of the worlds. It would rather be in its source. So the soul's rushing down because we have this kind of like the corner de market on Dome. There's the only place in the entire existence, which is the Or Ein Sof Sovev Kol Olmim, is either the Chafetz Hashem or the Asiya in which he planted the Chafetz Hashem, and therefore the soul, if it can't get it up there, it's going to come down here and get it. Okay, back inside. So really the fainting body is just like the broken bone, and therefore it's a weakening of the body. Therefore that's why you have to do something to return the soul into it. But when the body is healthy, it does not require any pu'ula. Okay, so we left off on that line. It says, Hanal Yashuv Nafsho Elav Chuluk. See that? The Indian Misa Pitomios, Rahman al-Islam. What about a sudden death? Also, he's bringing another example which would maybe contradict himself. Because if the body's healthy, why would a person just die suddenly? Doesn't the soul want to attach itself automatically to this body? He's bringing your questions. Noam. Zeu mipnei shemeir gili or kazeh she'i afshar likli haguf lekabel la'achil ribaya or. What's going on over there? It's because meir gili or kazeh, it shines suddenly a revelation of light. She'i afshar likli haguf lekabel, that the body cannot handle at that, right? Whatever happens when a person, God forbid, has a sudden death, it's the other way around. It's not that the body gets weak, it's that somehow there's this like powerful influx of soul which becomes too much for the body to handle. Lachil riboy or, and the body cannot handle and possess this level of light. Right? So in other words, it's like too much light of the soul, and therefore the body kind of automatically becomes weak. Not the body doesn't become weak, but the body winds up being a weak body because you've got like an influx of soul powers that tries to flush into it. You basically like fried out the circuits essentially to contain. V'zeu gamkin inyan misas neshikin. We've heard about this Moshe and Miriam and Aaron. It's like and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai coming up here, and today's the yurtzeit of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Wow. Right? There's special yurtzites. It's all and Nadav and Avihu we just had in the parsha. There's like a buzz going around with this misas neshikin, which means the kiss of death, which was coveted. Right? When Moshe saw Aaron pass away like this, he said, "Please take me the same way." And this is what that is. It's a sudden death with like no pain, no nothing. Again, it also seems to contradict. What's wrong? I have a healthy body. Shouldn't my soul just automatically want to maintain a position in my body because my body comes from Sovev? What's going on here? What happens is it's the influx of soul, so much light from above that the body simply can't hold on to it. And so that's the reason why the soul doesn't stay in the body. It's not because the body wasn't healthy, it's because you overdosed on soul.
See that with the Rashbi?
That's what happened with the Rashbi.
There's nowhere in the last step that ended when everything came down. It just...
Yeah, taka, right? Also with every tzaddik, it says like the last action they did was sort of like comprises the totality of their life. With Moshe, we say it's hechaltzu. There's a whole mimer about his last battle with Midian. Midian was like his final, and then you could, in other words, you could see there was an influx of Moshe Rabbeinu on the last day of his life. He wrote 13 Sifrei Torah in one day. That's a serious influx.
Yeah, but I remember one example, some years ago after Rabbi Kaduri passes away, that song? One of the biggest rabbis following after him, several weeks later. Harav Gaon Shishi goes up to Torah on Shabbos, Baruch Hu, boom, passed away. Sudden death.
Va'az ole hanefesh v'nichla v'nidbak l'mayla. Then what happens when there's an influx of light? The body can't handle it. It's no longer a kli that can hold so much light. The soul goes up, includes itself back into its source, clings above, and finished. Right at that level, if the body is again no longer a healthy kli for this light, and therefore the light can't stay. Same idea that we just spoke about it recently on the Shabbos, that when in the chevra of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, some of the students there just died instantaneously on the spot, right? Because they couldn't handle the type of light that was being brought down by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Same idea. Lefamim yagiloi hazeh gam kemitzad kli haguf. And he says sometimes this revelation can come from the vessel of the body itself. Dahainu kasher kli haguf hem bispilus yiser bechinas ratzo. Meaning to say, sometimes the sudden death comes because the soul essentially has an influx. Like we said, like they're bringing down so much Torah that the soul was we had also the famous story of when Rabbi shechted Reb Zera in the Purim Suda, right? And it says the Rebbe has this awesome sikha where he says his name was Rabbi because he was bigger. Zera means little, right? And it was Purim, and they drank physical wine just like Navadav and Avihu copiously. And basically, he brought down such intense secret to the Torah that little Rebbe Zera, he couldn't handle so much light. It's exactly what happened in the Idra, that the students of the Rashbi passed away from too much light coming down. Now he's saying that there's another scenario of like a sudden death, which is that the body itself it is the cause of this issue. Not the soul coming down, but the body going up. Meaning, a person could have such excitement, such a ratzo, right? From their body. And the idea is that when you have a ratzo, when you have a ratzo, which means you sort of, let's say, what is it considered like a ratzo? Like in our own world, we can understand it's like davening, right? That you sort of put your efforts on lamaila and you remove yourself from down below, and you just sort of like this little flame trying to get off your little wick there. Whenever you have a ratza, you create a reciprocal shuv, right? So it could be a person gets in such a state of excitedness, right, that he then draws down a light upon himself that his body cannot handle. So in other words, like he was the one who caused the influx of the soul himself by his extraordinary arousal, because he basically pulsed something up that the response of that pulse was something that he couldn't himself handle. He said actually this is the Indian of Mises B'nai Aaron, B'kir Vasam Lifnei Hashem, because they had such a ratzo, right? Mitzad Katnus HaKelim, right? They didn't have strong enough kelim to basically contain that which they sent up. What came back reciprocally was too much for them. Again, it's sort of the same thing. Too much soul in the body. He's just saying sometimes that could just be caused from above, like Aaron when he was kissed to death. He didn't do a special ratzo in order to do that. Hashem just decided to overdose his body and take him like that. Whereas in his sons, they sort of jimmied that up themselves from down here by creating such a passion from below. They brought upon themselves an influx of soul. It's a similar thing. He's just saying that it can happen from above, or you can actually cause it from below. So, yeah. By them, it was considered like a sin. It's kind of awesome how we're just like in some random Rosh Hashanah mimer, we're like right on the parsha. Right? This is considered like a sin. Why is it considered like a sin? In other words, don't get so excited that you wind up leaving your body. It's like a right. It's you have to control yourself not to do that. Obviously, we're not even in a position to arouse ourselves that we even have to sort of worry about this. But if it's a tzaddikim at this level, you have to be warned. Don't do that. Don't allow yourself to have such a klois hanefesh experience that you actually pulse the overdose of soul into your body and die. Why? What's wrong with it? Because the world was not created for tohu, el l'sheves yitzar. It was created in order to be settled. The idea is that Hashem wants the world to come back and make a dir b'tachtonim and associate itself down here with the Tachton. Why? Because that's how the essence is revealed, right? We just got through saying the Orein Sof HaSoviv is in the Gashmias. So therefore, Hashem does not want the Gashmias to be left to die and the soul go up and have its own sort of exciting experience. As high as it will go in its own spiritual delight, it's actually foregoing a higher spiritual reality which is found in the Gashmias, because the Gashmias, although it can't be seen, because one of the properties of Sovev is it's beyond perception, just like the energy, which is beyond all this matter. You can't actually see it. But the reality is inside of that Sovev is a higher reality. So therefore Hashem wants to do B'tachtonim because he wants to attach that even the essential sovev light should be revealed. So therefore, leaving your body and going out into this state of extra ratzo is sort of considered a sin, right? Because it's the opposite of the kavanah of the world. Just like we see that Rabbi Akiva, he went in peace to the Pardes, but he came out in peace because, and the other three that died there, they sort of missed the point. Also, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when he came out of the cave with his son killed everybody that was involved in simple mundane affairs just by looking at them, because his judgment, like, basically was like, how can you just farm and be a normal person? And Rabbi Shimon had to bring them back to life, because the whole idea is that despite the fact that the soul wants to go up, it has to recognize that its ultimate aliyah is to come down. V'lezos amisis bitel akli. What's that? But hold on, if we're asking questions already, let's go with Yaakov, because he had your hand up for a while there. Yeah.
If we're saying that the body source is so that the infinite light, and in a sense, shouldn't the body be an infinite vessel for the soul?
Ultimately, it is, right? In its perfected state, the soul will live forever in the body. Something called tchias hamesim, that the body never dies. And the body will basically last forever. And even now, the body lasts forever. Your loose bone, for example, just hangs around, it doesn't go anywhere. And physicality itself doesn't go anywhere. It's just that the soul, which is flowing through it, it sort of pops in and pops out. But the physicality is sort of an eternal reality. But the problem is because it is the essence of Hashem, and it's so high, it's also concealed. That's the only way for Hashem, like, rigged for this thing to actually come out and be seen, is that you can't see it. You can have access to it, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. It looks like, and that's why in the present state, most of us would not think of our bodies being higher than our soul, because the body is just this dumb thing that you have to drag around and breathe life into. It's a very deep Hasidic concept that came out even in Torah only sort of recently, in the last couple hundred years, that the source of the body is actually higher than the source of the soul. And from here comes the whole idea that women are higher than men, and speech is higher than wisdom, and the moon is higher than the sun. This whole paradigm shift, essentially, is because we're getting to the end of days when the physicality will have finally been rectified over thousands and billions of mitzvahs that Jews did with the physical world, to the point that it's actually a stable customer to show itself for what it really is, right? So, in the meantime, in Gullus mentality, the soul is higher than the body, and it has to enliven the body, and so to speak, the body can't live without it. But the reality is, in the future, the soul will gain its life force from the body. When there's tchias hamesim, our bodies last forever, the soul will be a recipient to the power of the godliness in the goof, not the other way around, as it is now.
It almost seems like it hints that the capacity for, like, existence is, like, so much greater, like, that our body could actually house way more soul than what we currently experience.
The perfected body. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
So they passed away the right, because of they overdosed. So how about all the other many Kohanim who passed away? Was it because it was like a punishment, or like why did they pass away? Was it an overdose, or was it like?
I mean, technically, you're saying in the second temple that the Kohanim went in there and died, and they had to be pulled out with a chain. Look, the Rebbe, who reads a positive spin on everything, he does explain it that they had like a shtickle Nadav and Avihu quality to them. The pshat is that they were not righteous enough to go in there, and they bought their way into the position because the Jewish people sort of had corrupted their ways a little bit, and the office of Kohen Gadol had become like a political thing you could buy and sell. So they're like this is like the Gullus way of reading this, right? The Rebbe, of course, reads it completely differently, because he says that every Jew, based on the Tanya, just desires Hashem, loves Hashem. There really is no sinning Jew in its core. But nonetheless, in an external way, Jews can sin, unfortunately. And these Jews, they tied a rope around them because they sort of were not fit or worthy to go in there. Nonetheless, why would a person buy their way into dying in the Holy of Holies, right? Because in a certain sense, his neshama wanted the Nadav and Avihu. It was worth for him to die to experience the Holy of Holies. You know, it's not right.
Because
Yeah, if you want to read it in a positive light. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they wouldn't have lost a second because it would be overdose, but also
Seemingly, because but they didn't die from natural causes, right?
But so Mashiach comes, seemingly we would all be able to go to the Kodesh then.
Yeah. That's what he says here. Lazos amisis bittul kli. Let's look at it. The true bittul of the kli. Because what did we just see here? That when the light comes in too much, the kli can't handle it. And when the kli gets all excited and decides to be a nadav and avihu, the body can't handle it, and it's considered a sin because we want a proper mezeg, right? A proper mixture, a proper balance between the body and the soul. And therefore, he says the true bittul of the kli. Right, that the kli, if you really are like talking about real life now, if you're a proper chassid, right, you don't want to be someone who's lost in the gashmias, because that's not a proper chassid. You have to realize that it's all about God, and you're here to serve Hashem. You're not here to get fancy cars and houses and just for their own sake and have honor and a big name and be all that is just nonsense. So you basically want to have a ratzo towards elukus and be totally l'shem shemaim, and yet you don't want to go too far, like those that entered into the pardes and never came back, or like Nadav and Avihu, because that's also not a healthy mixture for the body. You want to have just the right balance, because it's called not really being bittul. As funny as it sounds, Nadav and Avihu, they were so bittul that they actually died. That's called kloisa nefesh. How much more bittul could you be? It's not like they were doing something wrong per se. It's just this is what we call, they had a bittul to the ratzo, but not a bittul to the shuv. And the idea, therefore, is that that's not really bittul. You're not really doing what the king wants. You're doing what you want, because you wanted to have so much gilui elukus that you left your body against the will of the king, who wanted you to stay in your body. Right? So that's the whole idea of miftzoim, and that's the whole idea of opening a Chabad house. That why is it that the greatest Hasidim of other sects, they sit by their Rebbe in Kolel till they're old, white, and gray, and like that's the purpose of their life. Whereas our Rebbe, he says you can become very, very wise, and then you have to go and serve the people. You can't just keep getting wiser and wiser and wiser and stay inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He kicks us out. Right? Because he says that's not the purpose of the world, is to be in a state of tohu. The world's burning and happy for you. You're in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, having this divine experience. That's not a healthy mixture for the body. And therefore he says, what is a healthy mixture? When the kli feels the amisis hakavana elyona, your body knows what's really important. And therefore, as much as it wants to leave its corporal physical shtus, which is healthy, it doesn't go away from all bodily reality, i.e., v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and giving tzedakah, and being engaged in a world outside of you, because that's the true purpose of the body. It's not to go away from the body entirely. It should have just the right enough ratzo to draw down the right amount of light, so it shouldn't bring down too much light and then die and then lose its true kavana. Shov dafka. It gives a ratzo that will bring a shuv, not a ratzo that will bring to death. K'mavur kol zev makom acher ba'orech.
Close nefesh is not the purpose, but people like to do it.
We have to do it to a certain degree. Like, the Rebbe always points out, you have to be living with Mesiras Nefesh while you're alive. Mesiras Nefesh gives to give your life away. But you have to be living to give your life away, right? Like he always points out the difference between our generation and, let's say, the generation of the Jews that lived in the Soviet regime and everything. They actually died for God, and he said, and it's awesome. They were not having any of this nonsense. You don't let me perform my religion, kill me then. And like that level of like total devotion was what was called for at the time. But the reality is that we have to still be in that, then kill me then, but live. In other words, that therefore these like little trolls and all the nonsense that's seemingly standing in our way of creating the messianic Eretz HaKodesh, if we had the proper like kill me then attitude, no one's going to kill you. You're going to just like roll into Gaza and plant Mashiach flags all over the place, because we can't be stopped. In other words, think about the intensity of what the Frierdiker Rebbe had inside of himself that enabled him to open up underground schools and mikvahs for millions and millions of people against the sword against his neck. What if the sword wasn't physically against your neck, but you didn't lose the same like grit of being willing to open up a million underground schools and there's no one trying to stop you? You just roll your tanks right across the whole USA. That would be, and that's what the Rebbe did, right? It's like, in other words, he just, if you have the same like grit to take over and no one's stopping you to take over. That's what he's saying. It's like, it's free. It's free game over here. You take Oregon, you can take California. I'll take Brazil. Like it's crazy, and that's what it is. But if you slow down because there's no oppression against you, that's the problem. You might think, well, I can relax. And the Rebbe used to mess with Hasidim in 770 all the time. Now you sit here and drink tea with your Chalav Yisrael. I remember when you were mamash, ready to die inside of an underground tunnel. What happened to you now? Like, he would say this pretty much repetitively, trying to get these people to realize it's not a time to relax. It's a time to double down. You have to live with Mesiras Nefesh.
So this Mesiras Nefesh, Rabbi describing is more the concept of commitment. That I'm committed
To the point of being willing to die.
Right, and then like there are speakers that talk about that sort of thing, that you're going to succeed. You're like, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And it's not just it's a concept that's broad of people that.
Yeah, those speakers are called the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. Those are the speakers. Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's jump into Chavrusas. Very good. And